All right, it is 6:30. The board was called into order at 5:15 this evening for a committee of the whole, and so now we will begin our actual board meeting. We will begin with the consent calendar, and on the consent calendar, we do have the following in terms of staff retirements, who I wanted to recognize. Maria Katsaros Malzahn is leaving us after 27 years of service to the Oregon School District as a gifted and talented teacher at Brooklyn Elementary. So we thank Maria for her service and wish her well in retirement. And also Sean Stokes, after 6.5 years of service, he's a history teacher at OHS. So we want to wish him well as well. So thank you to those two educators who've done a lot in our district. Also want to read the following donations to the Oregon School District. $5,000 from the Bruning Foundation for the OHS AVID program, $25 from BJ Wirtz for the 8th grade leaf raking event, $50 from Ronald and Linda Graber for the 8th grade leaf raking event, $20 from Darlene Witkowski for the 8th grade leaf raking event, $25 from Peggy Fields for Books for Spark program, $25 from Carrie and Sonia Henriksen for the 8th grade leaf raking project, $25 from Matthew and Heather Young for the 8th grade leaf raking program, or event, $100 from Bob and Letha Schenkenberg for the donation for the pool, $25 from Greg and Michelle Lowry for the 8th grade leaf raking event, $500 from the women of St. John Lutheran's Church as a donation to help students in need, $4,000 from the Abbott Charitable Foundation for music, keyboards, bass, and miscellaneous as needed, $300 from Tyler and Amy Cotter, gifts for FES families in need, $920.87 from the Oregon Athletic Boosters as a donation for TVs, $1,025 for the Oregon Athletic Boosters for donation for golf bags, a $914.32 donation for the Girls Swim State bus from the Booster Club, and then $25 from Ann Reinsdorfer for the 8th grade leaf raking event, $58,103 from Bell Bank for the Prairie View Elementary social workers, and then $708.01 from Culver's of Oregon as a 10% for the OHS girls basketball share night. So thank you very much to those entities and individuals for their contributions to the Oregon School District. That is very impressive, and we are very, very appreciative. Okay, so I will entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar. We also do have field trip requests on there that the board saw for approval as well. So is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion on the consent calendar? Okay, hearing none. Katie, could you please call the roll?
Ms. Wright?
Yes.
Mr. Pankratz?
Yes.
Ms. Bijak?
Yes.
Ms. Garrison?
Yes.
Dr. Lakuta?
Yes.
Ms. Flanagan?
Yes, motion carries 6-0. Moving on to C, information items. First item is public comment. We do have two people here for public comment, so I will read our policy associated with public comment. District Policy 180.05 provides an opportunity for the public to address the board. We value the public comment period and feedback from our stakeholders. So to comply with open meetings law and to ensure consistency, public comment will have the following parameters. Speakers will have 3 minutes in which to make their comments, and Ms. Katie Heitz will signal the speaker when their time is up. And the board will not comment after each speaker and will reserve discussion to any items on the agenda, and speakers are welcome to stay for the meeting. Next step following public comment may include referral to the appropriate administrator for follow-up with the speaker or placement of the matter on a future board agenda. All right, our first speaker, Jenna Jacobson. So Jenna, if you want to come up to the microphone, and you have 3 minutes. You sure can. Joining Jenna is Clinton Anderson. So welcome.
Good evening, everybody. Good evening. So my name is Jenna Jacobson. I represent the 45th Assembly District, which includes the Village of Oregon and most of the school district of Oregon. And
I'm Representative Clinton Anderson. I represent the 45th Assembly District.
oh, sorry.
Yes. And I don't have very much of the Oregon School District, but I'm very happy to be here too.
And we just wanted to stop by, say hello, introduce ourselves for those of you who haven't met yet, say hello to those we have. We also delivered the 2023-24 Blue Books to you all, something the legislature puts out every biennium. It has fun facts about the legislature and interesting history in Wisconsin. Really helpful if you are into that, or a good nighttime reading aid if not. So, yeah, you want to?
I just appreciate all the work you do. I serve in local government. I know Jenna did as well. It's not an easy task. It's thankless. So I know the policy said you're not going to respond, but I just want to share my appreciation for all the work you do.
Absolutely. And just to offer our assistance, should you ever have questions about a state level issue, want to share your thoughts on a piece of legislation, or need help with a state agency, you're welcome to give either one or both of us a holler, and we will happily help you out.
Great, thank you guys. Thank you for your
Thank you.
service. Okay, anyone else here for public comment? All right, hearing none, we will move on to OEA report. I believe we do not have a report today for the OEA. We were going to have a student here, but I think she's been waylaid, so if she does join us, we'll have her give a report when she arrives. So moving on to D, action items. The first is the approval of the 2022-2023 audit. So I will turn that over to Mr. Weiland.
Thank you. You all, speaking of material that will put you to sleep, got a nice document this weekend. I will say a couple comments about it. The first thing I wanted to point out is on page I, this is my favorite line in the entire document. In our opinion, the accompanying financial statements present fairly in all material respects the respective financial position of the governmental activities in each major fund, aggregate remaining fund information to the Oregon School District as of June 30th, and the respective changes in the financial positions thereof of the year, then ended in accordance with the accounting principles generally accepted by the United States of America. So basically, this is a unmodified opinion for the district. There really were no findings of any significance that the auditors found. So that's kind of kudos to Cara Newton, who really works very hard to make sure that we accurately report the information. And the audit went fairly well again this year, although I will tell you that it is very difficult finding auditors. They are actually less and less auditors that are willing to take school districts in the state of Wisconsin because of some of the onerous things that continue to be kind of piled upon them. So the newest thing, just to bring you up to speed on it, was basically the auditors have to go out and hire a company to figure out technical multi-year lease accounting, basically. So if we were to enter a lease, for instance, with some type of technology that's a multi-year type thing, the auditors have to go out and find they've already done this, but basically put a bunch of information into an accounting program that then spits out the numbers of how they have to record that. That was a new GASB ruling this last year. So when I said governmental accounting principles, the GASB is the governmental accounting principle group that comes out with standards for all governmental entities, and it continues to get more and more onerous in that regard. So that's the newest thing that's happened. I will also say that these documents constantly are trying to find different audiences, let's say. And so there are actually different ways to present the information. And within this document, there's actually two ways, which kind of combines everything basically for bondholders to kind of see. And that's where the GASB organization is continually trying to identify perhaps concerns that the bondholders would have, but also the Department of Public Instruction needs the information in a different way. And the information that I've shared with you all along during this fall process and as we were getting ready for the budget is according to how DPI does it. It's more of kind of a cash basis with some modifier accrual going on in the accounting process, but for the most part, it's much simpler than the information in this book includes. So the last thing I will share with you is a good portion of it, several pages in this document, is related to something that none of us at this school district actually have any control over. There are multiple pages in here related to the pension system in the state of Wisconsin. And obviously we do not have any control over how those pensions are invested or how they, what happens on a yearly basis. So if you get into this particular document, you will see millions of dollars kind of moving around a little bit. That's not Andy or the school district moving around millions of dollars. That is actually how the pension system happens. Last year, the pension system in the state of Wisconsin was slightly overfunded. They had done really well. This year, they actually kind of swung the other way. And so those little changes, again, the pension system in the state of Wisconsin is very, very well in a good position, but just a minor little switch can move how our financial documents are distributed or are presented to the community. So That's all I wanted to say about this document here. The other thing that's required in our board policy is that we look at kind of the percentages that are included within our budget and how they relate to our budget as far as fund balance. And the last several years, we always include 10 years. So in the agenda item that we provided you, you can again see that we've done that for you. After being kind of at some high points in the high 28, 29% as far as balances in the last, back in early 2020s, we are, again, at that almost 30% mark. If you look at unassigned fund balance, though, we are significantly lower. And so that's something to kind of keep in mind. What that means is if we were to take and intentionally and actually spend the funds that we've assigned for different purposes and use those dollars, our unassigned fund balance would actually drop fairly significantly, several $1,000,000, and then we could get into a situation where we might have some cash flow issues. So that's not, I'm not throwing the alarm up or anything. In fact, this last year we made those numbers a little bit better than they had been last year. So good move in that regard, but something to just be cognizant of is that if we spend the funds that we've assigned, then we might start having some cash flow issues, which per our board policy is the thing that would trigger us to try to do some things to build up those cash, that fund balance again. So I just talked a lot, and I know some of it's pretty boring, but I just wanted to see if anybody had any questions related to the information that's here tonight.
Troy, I think I'll start with you as treasurer. Do you have any comments or questions for Andy? General comments or questions?
Just
I'll let go.
just one question on the, I was reading about the multi-year technology subscription item, and yeah, you mentioned that. I'm just wondering, is that something that might in the future drive our decision that we make to maybe not do multi-year subscriptions and do single year?
It already has.
Okay.
We constantly are kind of evaluating whether a multi-year is to our advantage. You know, the software vendors actually try to present it that way so that, you know, they have an ongoing revenue stream. But if they don't give us a significant enough discount, then we're kind of like, well, maybe we just go on a year-to-year basis type thing. So, yeah, we've actually used that fairly often these days.
Okay. Thank you. Yep, that's all I had.
Other questions? Go ahead, Mary.
Thank you. So, Andy, I know you also mentioned in here that our policy requires calculations to be done in one manner, but then there is a different approach taken. Can you explain to me why the difference and where the pros and cons are?
Sure. Our policy predated the auditors doing this. So we've been doing this calculation for 20 years. And I did mention that. And actually, I was thinking, boy, we touched this policy. Did I change it? And we figured out that we hadn't changed it yet. The whole thing actually goes down to, if you look at the calculation in our board policy, we say to take the general fund plus the transfer to special education, to use that as it would be the denominator in the equation. The auditors actually use the general fund plus the entire Fund 27. So they use all the expenses in Fund 27. We're only taking the transfer, which is $1 million some less. So that's the difference, and it just makes sense that we probably should adopt what the auditors have. So the next time we touch that financial policy, I think we just go ahead and make that small little change to include all the expenses in Fund 27. For the most part, the audit almost looks at Fund 10 and 27 like there's no difference. They don't even compare them. DPI created Fund 27 40 years ago or something, basically as a way to specifically track special education costs, because they categorically reimbursed us for some things and like that, and their accounting system kind of required that. But from an accounting perspective, really they're one fund, because the special education fund has no fund balance at the end of the year, and it basically you just do a transfer. And so it probably makes more sense to combine the two when we're doing this calculation.
So then the only thing we need to be aware of is as we track, forward, then the percentages will
Yeah,
obviously
if
change.
if we were to change the board policy, what we'd do is we'd just go back and restate our numbers to
Okay.
equal the auditor's numbers.
Got it. Thank you.
You bet. Other
Anna, go ahead.
questions?
Thank you. It's just a couple of quick questions, I guess, to carry a little bit on the questions about the percentages. I will admit, I don't know policy 6.11.04 all that well. And so my question is is there a defined threshold or range of percentages we're trying to hit with that?
It's actually not a percentage. What the policy states is that as long as we do not have to cash flow borrow. So as long as we do not have
I
to
see.
go to a bank and say, hey, we need to meet payroll in December, which is December and January are kind of our two low points. We would need to take a line of credit, that type of thing. We actually did do that, just for a quick history lesson. When we pre-purchased the property where Forest Edge Elementary School is, we were really close. So we actually went out and got a line of credit for $500,000 from Oregon, or One Community Bank, so that we had that kind of in our back pocket. And I think we did exercise maybe a couple $100,000 of it just to make sure that we didn't have any issues in the end of November, December, I think, that particular year. So we've been close. We put some money into fund balance this year, so that helps build us. But the other concern I mentioned in the agenda item is as we become more
Property
dependent
tax.
on property taxes, because the state views us as more wealthy per student, that's what happens. Those revenues don't really start coming in until after the first of the calendar year, whereas the state revenues are a little bit better distributed throughout the entire year. So that exacerbates the issue that I was talking about from a cash flow basis in kind of that late November, December area.
Right, so I guess two follow-ups, is what the percentage is telling us, other than, okay, if we reach a certain percentage low, if there's a limit to the percentage we don't want to be below to be able to have that cash flow, or if that's just, I'm just curious
Yeah.
what that means.
I think from the reason we track it is just so we have kind of a historical area of how we are doing, because
Okay.
it does give you an idea of the total expenses where you are. But really, because of what I just said before, you kind of want to have that number growing a little bit, because as we're
Yeah.
become more wealthy, we have to rely more on
Right.
the property taxes, at least until January, when we start getting those revenues to start coming in.
So should that be part of the strategy that we're looking to do, is to grow that?
Yeah, and last year, if you look at this, I got to get to the second page here. We did, so that's a good thing. And we grew both in the unassigned and the assigned. So I'm not sure that we'll be able to match that type of growth each year, but at least we made that growth this last year.
And if we start to see some of the assigned fund balance be utilized, now we're still stuck in a little bit of a pickle with,
We're just going to have
cash
to keep
flow.
an eye on it, right? Because the assigned is meeting that need right now for cash flow. So,
you mentioned that we have, there are fewer and fewer maybe companies that are doing this. Two questions, I guess. One is, did we request proposals for this, or did we go with a company we've had?
This is the same company that we had. We extended this last year, but that is a question. We've been actually internally debating whether we want to go out for requests for proposals for the next year or two or three. The company has indicated that we work with Johnson & Block, that there would be a fairly significant increase this next year. But my fear is that if we go out on the market, it could be much higher. So there's a safety component to basically staying with the auditor that we have. Not only in that we all kind of know each other and we know our processes, but also in this environment right now, I'm a little fearful that we could be at risk of a larger increase than what we'd be looking for by staying at the current company. So if the board though has a feeling or strong feeling for that, we obviously would want to take that into consideration for our future audits. There is something to be said, you know, in a stable environment, I would probably suggest going out. Tim brought this up in the past and said that, you know, it's good, and I don't disagree with that. You sometimes you get into some, and if you look at all their documents, they talk about, you know, disagreements with management and all that kind of stuff. But it's good to have another set of eyes to kind of look at things and see if there's anything that's different than how the last set of eyes looked at it. So I definitely appreciate that. My fear just is in this environment when there are less and less companies that are willing to do the work, that we might be in a difficult situation.
Is that it, Anna? Any other questions from the board? Okay, I will entertain a motion.
I'll make that motion. I will move to approve the acceptance of audit report for 2022, 2023, and fund balance report.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Okay, hearing none. Katie, could you please call the roll?
Dr. Lakuta? Yes. Mr. Pankratz?
Yes.
Ms. Bijak?
Yes.
Ms. Garrison? Yes. Ms. Wright? Yes. Ms. Flanagan?
Yes, motion carries 6-0. And a thank you to Andy and to Kara. Please extend our thanks. Audits are no joke. It's a lot of work, and we've been very consistent as a school district as having approved audits and no major issues, and that's no small feat. So thank you, guys. Okay, moving on to action item 2, which is cancellation of the December 25th, 2023 Board of Education meeting. Again, state statute mandates that we meet the second Monday. We don't have to meet the 4th, but we usually do, but that is Christmas Day. So as much as I love you all, I don't think we want to gather on Christmas Day together. So I will entertain a motion to cancel that meeting, so we have a formal motion to that. All right, is there a second? All right, Mary and then Leslie. Any discussion on that motion? Hearing none, Katie, could you please call the roll?
Dr. Lakuta?
Yes.
Ms. Wright?
Yes.
Ms. Bijak?
Yes.
Ms. Garrison? Yes. Mr. Pankratz? Ms. Flanagan?
Yes, motion carries 6-0. Moving on to E, discussion items. Again, with committee reports, we are not having our policy and vision steering. We are meeting now as committee of the whole. And so I will give those reports. We did have a meeting before this meeting on our 4K program. It was our third meeting. And so we are entertaining options about what the future looks like and what we need to do. And so those will come forth to the board as part of the staffing report in April. And so the community will have an opportunity to listen to that and what we plan for the future. But our 4K program is strong. And now it's looking at options that we need to do to serve all of our students in that area. And we are very thankful for our partners and hope that we continue to work with them. So that's where we are with 4K. And our next topic for Committee of the Whole is transportation, I believe. So that will be at our first meeting in January. Okay, moving on to F, information items. First item is election update. As we do each year, we do have an election coming up. That election date is April 2nd. And we do have 2 seats that are up for re-election. Papers are due for that on January 2nd. And so those seats are one in the Village of Oregon, which is Mary Lakuta, and then one in the Village of Brooklyn, as well as those surrounding communities, and that's Troy Pankratz. So as is tradition, those board members have the opportunity to state here if they plan to run for re-election or not. So I will turn it first to Troy.
Yes, so I will be running for re-election. Hope to serve this fine community again for another 3 years.
All right, and Dr. Lakuta.
I also am going to run for re-election and look forward to an enjoyable time with the board.
All right, thank you. Katie, anything else that we need to mention in terms of, okay, moving on to 2, which is visioning and strategic planning, and so I will turn that over to Dr. Bergstrom.
Thank you. So, as you've seen this many times before, but tonight we have some really interesting things to report related to the outcomes of our visioning and strategic planning framework. In the teaching and learning section tonight, our Director of Learning and Student Achievement, John Tanner, will talk about our state report cards and about the next 100-day cycle in our SAIL process, which is really how we are taking the Board of Education priorities and the school district goals and creating something that is operational and meaningful at the school level, because the schools really are the agent of change within our school district, and the district office and the board provide support and direction. And I'm excited now for John to come up and talk to us a little bit about our DPI 22-23 report card. As he's coming up, I'll note that anyone listening, all report cards are publicly accessible on the DPI website. You would look at, or you would go to the site and look up WISE Dash, and then you'll be able to click on a link and see every report card in detail from the school district, and actually all school districts in the state of Wisconsin. And we have Darcy Krieger joining John tonight too, so thank you both for being here.
Yes, thank you. I decided to bring a friend. There we go. I think that's sort of on. It's not very, yeah. It's on, it's just not very loud. All right. Yeah, thank you for having us. We are here just to provide the overview of the state report cards, which come out every year. So DPI publishes these annually for every public school district and private school district, actually, some of them. And they were published in November. Oh, there we go. Thank you. November 14th. And they were shared with the board previously in one of the weekly mailings, and they are available publicly, as Dr. Bergstrom just noted. So tonight we are presenting some celebrations and some opportunities based on the report cards. And the first thing you'll see is the summary of the scores. As you can see, the district did quite well. We are in the exceeds expectations category. And to give you some perspective on what that means compared to the rest of the state, our achievement score for the district is higher than 86% of the districts in the state. And we can go to the next one. All right, so the report cards have calculations, and so this slide kind of explains how the score is calculated. There are 4 components that go into the calculation. On DPI's website, if you're really interested, they have like a calculator where you can enter things in and see what would happen if our demographics were slightly different. But the 4 components are achievement, which, as you recall, is basically students meet the proficiency benchmarks that are set by the state. Growth, which is 2 measures, one from a prior year and one for this year. So they measure this on the forward exam, so the spring of each year. And so this is last year this is from the spring of 2021 to the spring of 2022, or 22 to 23, sorry, 22 to 23 for this one. The target group outcomes are a group of students who are in the 25th percentile or less in a different measurement that also contains 4 components, which are slightly different than these. But basically, we're looking at that and seeing what the outcomes are for that group of students. And then on track to graduate. So these are some of the educational milestones that predict later success based on research, and we will talk about those a little bit more in the future. The school district priority weights are in that pie chart there. And you'll notice, looking at different schools or different districts, if you happen to, that the pie chart has different shapes. And so these weightings are determined by the demographics of each district or each school. So they'll be slightly different. All right, so areas of celebration, as you already saw, all the schools meet or exceed or significantly exceed the expectations. And a good thing that we've noticed is that our scores are continuing to improve. This is up from the 21-22 school year, so that's a good thing. And then I'd like to show you a few specific areas of celebration. We're not going to go through it all in detail because obviously you've had the opportunity to look, but this is one that we really wanted to bring out. The first one is the example is the outstanding Oregon High School value added or growth scores. So these measure the growth of students in specific demographic groups. I realize that this printing is really small. What I'm actually you don't need to read all the things, but each one, there is a demographic subgroup, such as English language learners or economically disadvantaged or Hispanic Latino or Black African American or white or proficient last year. And so what they do is measure how much the growth is for each one of these groups in our school versus students in those same demographic groups in the entire state. So this is a factor they use to try to eliminate any variables that exist outside of school. So you're comparing like students to like students. And in the Oregon High School example here, what's really great is it's on a 0 to 6 scale. The gray line in the center is a 3, which is the state average, the way they norm them. And to the right of each gray line in dark blue are positive scores. And you see all these are to the right. So you don't really need to read the little things. You can just see, hey, there's a dark blue square to the right of the line. That means we are above average. So this was a really great one. These are measured only in English, language arts, and math. But these are, building blocks for all the content areas. And so this is really great news for us. And so we were really excited to see that kind of growth that happened this year for the high school.
John, can you share about growth for the district overall? And then where is you've got that coming actually. That's coming right up. Mm-hmm. But this level of growth for the high school, what percentage does that place the high school when compared to others in the state?
The high school, it's like the top 2%, I believe. It's like 98%, 98th percentile for in the state. It's really high. Thank you. Forgot to put that one in there. Yeah, for the growth for students. So super high growth, super high value added. Thank you for reminding me of that. The next one. I know, yeah, that is a good one to be proud of. I had the pleasure of talking that through with the high school when they came out, and the staff was very proud, as they should be, of all their work. So it was great. Some other areas of celebration. We have 2 schools that are in the significantly exceeds category, which is wonderful. Well, that's just wonderful. So that's great. Well, don't have to say much more than that, right? The 5 stars out of 5, just in case anybody's wondering. In the next slide, another area of celebration, and this is back to district-wide. These are the growth, the point change the points change, and in this case, they're all positive, which means these are all growth. So English language arts, these are all the demographic groups. Groups that have less than 20 students are not shown for student privacy reasons. But what's great about this is on the right in that green box, which the green box is what I added. It's not there on the report if you're looking at it. But all these are increased numbers, which means that our proficiency went up for every demographic group, which is really great. And then similarly, on the next slide, we have the same thing in math. All but one went up. We did have one that went down, and these are not quite as dramatic increase changes, but it's still overall very positive with the growth in proficiency at all levels district-wide, so that's great. We also found areas of opportunity for growth. And one that I want to note is we would like to increase growth score in the middle grades. So, one of them, our proficiency rates are still quite good. And we'd like to actually increase the growth of the middle grade students. Even though our proficiency is really good, the growth from one year to the next could improve more. So that's one thing that we're looking at as an opportunity area. The next opportunity area is we would love to increase our on-track to graduation score. So our current graduation rate, at least last year, was 96.7%, which is really good. Our on-track, there's like 3 percentages in this, or 3 scores, so that's one of them. You got to know that our graduation rate is about 97%, which is really good. Our graduation calculation is determined by 4 components. And the 4 components, as you see there on the right, are chronic absenteeism, because we know that if you come to school more, you do better, and if you don't come to school as much, you tend to do worse. Our actual graduation rate, so our historical graduation rate is a component that predicts our future graduation rate. 3rd grade English language arts scores. So obviously this is something that the high school does not have any control over. But this is for cohort groups that go through. So they look at the 3rd grade English language arts score. And the last one is 8th grade math. Again, the high school doesn't control this, but it is something that we look through as a system because we know that it's a whole K-12 system and we all contribute to this. So these are 4 research-based areas that are highly predictive of a student graduating. You can make very accurate predictions about their likelihood to graduate based on these things. And so the state looks at this for our entire student body as they move through the system. So overall, our district's on track to graduation is higher than 83% of districts in the state. So our whole on track system is really good. And as we look at opportunities to grow, we see that of these different areas, the one that we have the most opportunity to grow in would be the 8th grade math score. We're very high at the chronic absenteeism. We're a really good score there, really good at graduation. There's not a lot we can do there to get much better. And 3rd grade language arts, we're already like 15 points above the state average. So we're actually really quite good there. 8th grade math, we're still above the state average. There's a little bit more gap there that we could probably do. And what I will say too is that based on data that we saw 3 years ago, we decided that a shift in curriculum was necessary. So I'm going to preview the action steps that we've taken here. And so we actually implemented a new, we spent a while learning and selecting, and I've told you before, we've implemented a new math curriculum that started this fall. And so we are looking forward to now that the new curriculum aligns to the DPI math standards, which are what the forward test is based on, because our old curriculum hadn't kept up with that. We are looking forward to students learning to show increased scores this spring based on those standards, and to continue in the future as that math program continues to roll out and our teachers implement it and continue to get training and coaching on it. The next action step, which you have heard a bit about too, is supporting the K-5 English Language Arts curriculum, which also launched this fall after an extensive review and really extensive training for many, many, many staff at the primary grades. And that's one of the reasons I brought Darcy here. So if you have questions, she can answer those much better than I can. And then the third action step is related to this, is to continue the sale process of our 100-day improvement cycles, which are aligned to our goals, which really parlays nicely into the next presentation. But I won't get there yet. I want to pause and ask for any questions that you have about the state report cards.
All right, the floor is open to ask clarifying questions. So go ahead, Heather.
Hi. Thank you for sharing this information. I have a couple of questions, which may or may not be answered tonight, but could you go back to the first slide, where the summary slide, where it just lists by school? It would be helpful to know kind of historically where we were last year, the last couple of years, or over the last, just to see where we're trending. Because I mean, I see the exceeds expectations, but I don't know, does that mean that we drop down overall as a school district, or, you know, school by school? So that would be helpful. If you can speak to that now, that would be great. If not,
I can briefly.
Okay.
Last year we were all exceeds or meets. We didn't have any schools that were significantly exceeds. I will say before the pandemic we had a few who were significantly exceeds. I can pull up some of those from past years if you want, or it is all accessible publicly on the DPI site as well. But district, we were exceeds, and
yeah, just going forward, I think it would be helpful to see, you know, have multiple columns so that we can compare numbers, apples to apples or oranges to oranges. The second question I have is just when you talked about the middle grades, are you specifically talking about the middle school, or is that 5 through 8, or what?
Yeah,
what does that
we're
mean?
talking roughly 5 through 8,
Okay.
and maybe 6 through 8. Because of us having an intermediate school, sometimes the data is a little bit weird, because there are middle schools that are 7-8, that are 6-8, and that are 5-8. And we tend to see a dip, everybody does, in those middle grades. Now, whether that starts at 5th and goes to 6th and 7th and 8th before going back up at high school is a little bit different. So it's not, and here we have the difficulty of, if I say middle school, we're talking about only grades 7 and 8, but we
Right.
kind of see that in 6th grade as well. And so we're kind of talking about 6 through 8 and sometimes 5.
Okay. And then my other question is, and again, I know that this is one way of reporting. This is not the end all be all of anything. So please note that I'm aware of that when I ask this question. But what can you help identify, not the number, like why 77 versus 85 or whatever the number is. What is the difference in exceeds expectations to significantly exceeds expectations? What is causing that between various schools? What is the data that's leading to that, where, I guess I'm not asking a clear question. What is the data that's leading to that so that we can understand what's happening at schools where there significantly exceeds as opposed to meets?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and it's one that we asked ourselves as well. And I worked a lot with Dawn Goltz, who's actually very good at data and
Right.
really loves it. And so we dug into this, and Darcy's dug into this as well. We have various theories, and there's a few of them. One is, and we haven't figured out which this is, so these are theories right now. One is that Brooklyn and Prairie View both use win time, or what I need time. It's an intervention block which is available for everybody, all the students in the school, to get an extra dose or intervention of whatever they need, versus other schools where that's a sort of a pull-out or a push-in. And so it's harder to provide, if students need an extra dose of something, it's harder to provide that without pulling them out of something else if you don't have that win block.
Built in.
Another aspect that could explain it is that those two schools are probably the most data-driven ones, in that they look fairly hard at the data, and that's just because, that's what Dawn's been doing for the past 9 years. That may be simply a correlation, not causal. Hard to say there. That's true with WIN as well. One of the things, though, that we're doing as part of the sale process, which we'll talk about a little bit more, is some of the things we've been doing is strengthening our data practices in terms of quality and our frequency of reviewing it, and trying to focus on some specific things so that we can guide our future actions and actually test some of our hypotheses by finding promising practices and then implementing them in multiple times within a school year, so that we can say, oh, this practice had an impact, and then we know that that's what it is. Because it is hard from year to year, because there's just demographic differences.
Right.
There's differences in lots of things, there's lots of things that happen. And so we're trying to do that in a more structured format with SAIL that'll allow us to answer those questions better.
Okay,
Do you have
and then
anything to add to that?
go ahead. No, I have one last question. If you can go, there were the slides with the green box. If you go to the second one of that. Yep, so just reading this, right as I'm going down the green box, I'm seeing that various demographic groups, that's their growth, or for example, the one that isn't, that's negative in growth, or opposite of growth. Is this then, are these scores, to me, I look at this and I see it's indicative of a big gap, right? Because you've got Asian at 82.8 and white at 77.7 and Black or African at 43.1. So it's, in my mind, it's a red flag, which I'm sure you all have as well. This is not new information. It's not so much to me that there's growth, although that's what DPI is measuring, right? As it is the score disparities between the two groups. So can you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, that is actually one of the things that we've been looking at as well. These are actually proficiency rates of the different demographic groups. So when you see that difference, then that is a difference, and that is a gap that we've seen. So one of the things that we've done, and I'll say we tried a couple of years ago, is we tried identifying a specific focus group that we would look at. And it could be, we allowed each school to define it in a specific way. Some chose a specific ethnic demographic group, others chose like ELLs, or some, well, anyway. When we did that for 1 year, the data didn't change anything, so we didn't see any difference. And so what we've started to do is treat that a little differently. Something that DPI did also, which is related to this, is they used to have, they've replaced racial and ethnic demographic measures a few years ago with their target group calculation, which is that 25th percentile and below. Which there can be some overlap, but there's not always, but it does, there are some that are pretty low on here, which would be probably included in that. And so if you look at the whole report card, there are areas too where it says, okay, how did your target group compare growth, compare with your just the general at the whole class. You'll remember from previous presentations how we had the like the graphic that looked at the starting lines, the track where some start ahead, some start behind. So that target group demographic is like what we are focusing on to say we need greater growth for them in order to increase the proficiency rates here, which we've found, which is good, because as you'll see, the proficiency rates are going up. However, we want to make sure that our proficiency rates are our growth is going up much more for the target group than it is for the regular, and that's something that we struggle with. So that is something that we're putting a lot of effort into identifying and doing culturally responsive teaching, providing extra supports, meeting those whole child needs that they need in order to be successful learners. And none of this is to say that any of these groups are like, there's nothing specific about the groups. It's basically our system is set up in a way that perpetuates these. And so even when we said, hey, we really want to look at these specific groups, our system wasn't really set up to do that. And so we're trying to take a look at the outcome of our system and our system impact data to say, okay, we need to do something differently, and we can't just treat everybody the same because we're going to keep on getting the same outcomes over and over. So some of the things you see on here are encouraging, others are discouraging. The growth of 8 points for Black or African American, encouraging. The negative for English learners in math, the Black African American is positive for 8 points, negative for 2.7 lower. So that's something that, as we look at our English language learners cohort, we're doing sort of a root cause analysis for that, and especially in math, because some of there's language in math, and so that's one of the theories we have on that.
All right, go ahead, Mary, and then Leslie.
So it seems to me maybe 2 board meetings ago, we talked about the new curriculum that is coming out in the K-6. And it seems to me that someone, perhaps you, John, mentioned that what seems to be happening at the middle school level is there's some deficiency of the K-6 curriculum that's not setting our middle schoolers up for success. And so my question is, I know OMS, the report card score was, I think, 65.1. And that is relative to all of the other schools in Wisconsin. So, we are definitely dipping at that point. It's a two-part question. How quickly do you expect to see an impact from the new K-6 curriculum? And then what other strategies are planned to target an increase in the grade report card?
Would you like reading or math or both?
Both, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
I've talked for a while. You can start.
I'll start with ELA. Okay, so we adopted the K-5 ELA curriculum. So the students, our fifth grade students, are receiving the first year of that curriculum this year. So we hope to see improvement that continues and builds as the years go. One of the things that we noticed during implementation, I'm spending a lot of time, Kim White and I are, with all of the teachers who teach the new curriculum. And we're hearing at the higher grades of the curriculum, this is really rigorous and difficult because the students don't have the benefit of the years prior. So it's taking it'll take some time, but I believe we'll see growth as early as this year. With respect to the middle school, it's very timely that you ask the question tonight, because I just sent out an email to all the 612 teachers today that we're going to begin to replicate that implementation plan with the review and planning team at 6-8. I'm hoping that we can build a team together this summer to take a look at our curriculum resource, and line it up next to the Wisconsin state standards and determine whether or not we're going to enhance or replace our curriculum. And then once the team makes those recommendations based on our knowledge base, we will take one of those routes. Now, before we do that, we're offering Similar to the elementary schools, you might remember hearing about LETRS, the language essentials for teachers of reading and spelling. There is kind of like the next step for middle and upper grades, and the path we're choosing is called Aspire. It's a super rigorous program. Again, it's about 30 hours total. And it all deals with kind of the foundations of structured literacy at the middle and upper grades. So we're going to start that. We're going to launch that as early as January 1st so that those people that are on our review and planning team and potentially pilot or enhancing team will have the foundational understanding of what structured literacy looks like so that we can make the most informed decisions for that group of students.
Go ahead, Leslie. Sorry, John, did you want to answer the second half of that?
Oh.
Sorry. I didn't mean to.
Math, we expect a small amount. We expect growth this year because the curriculum's aligned to the standards. And so we're expecting a bump there, which should help. But, with every implementation, sometimes there's that implementation dip as people try something new and they get trained. The training load for the math curriculum is significant this year, implementing it, obviously, but we also have our every PD day, the new 6-8 math teachers, who are doing the new curriculum, are getting a trainer from the company who comes and does the training, and she also does visits of the classrooms the days before the professional development day, and then has follow-up conversations with them, to give them feedback on their teaching. And so it's not evaluative. It's not, she doesn't tell us what's going on, but it's really great because it's somebody who's taught it for years and is really highly trained and very familiar with the curriculum, who's coming in and giving them observations and she's seen, hundreds of classes, so she can give them the support they need that's very individualized based on their classroom practices and the training that happens during the PD day. So it's ongoing throughout this year, both training and coaching. So there's a lot of work, but with that kind of support, we're hoping that this will be a fairly immediate improvement with continued growth in the future. So we'll see. That one was just the math, but ELA is similar, but we're doing the coaching and visitation parts in-house. Darcy's been leading walkthroughs of that too.
All right, Leslie.
Okay, so first of all, I heard about your walkthroughs, and apparently they are nerve-wracking for some of the people, but I heard that they were all doing really great. So that's awesome to hear. So my actual question was, on the screen where we were talking about the individual schools, different things, I'm wondering if DPI provides a grade level breakdown, because then potentially if we were able to get a grade level breakdown, we could figure out where that dip is starting to occur. Plus things like, for example, Forest Edge has a lower percentage than the other elementary schools, and I'm assuming that's because the dip starts 5th, 6th grade as opposed to in the lower grades. And I'm just wondering if that's available or what we have looked into for that kind of thing.
Yeah, so there's not a report card for that specifically from DPI, but what we do have is we can break down they offer demographics that you can disaggregate by lots of things, like grade level for a specific grade at a specific school. The other thing I'll mention is that our STAR data that we use, so Forward is just once in the spring. STAR we use multiple times throughout the year for different purposes, but one of the purposes we can use is to do that analysis. And STAR generally aligns really well with Forward, so it's not like one is drastically different than the other when you're looking at a whole data set. So yeah, we can actually pull that and look at it and see what happens at 5th grade and 6th grade, and we could pull that out too for. And we could do a comparison of Forest Edge, K4 versus the other schools. We try to praise the schools that are doing well. We try not to do too much competition, but I see your point about doing it, K4 to have an apples to apples comparison. We can't regenerate the school report card score on it, but one of the things that we frequently do is look at things and say, hey, what are you doing? I see this. What are you doing to get that kind of success? And the elementary principals are great about sort of mentoring and helping each other with some of those practices. They'll pitch in and be like, hey, how are you doing this? And so they've learned a lot from each other over time. And also that's one of the things that we want people to do in their professional learning communities is bring student work, look at it and say, hey, what was done, your students did really well on this. What did you do differently that can inform that? And so we're trying to model that at a high level too. So we can pull that and make some comparisons, and we kind of do, but not recreating that.
Yeah, it's just such a unique situation because since we have the one school that's different than all the others, so it'd be kind of interesting to see how, the RCA portion with the 5th, 6th than the other schools. No, thank you.
Any other questions? Go ahead, Troy.
So I want to talk a little bit about the middle school. So, obviously on the first slide, the middle school draws attention, and I want to believe that the score does not represent all of the hard work that our students and our staff are doing there. But, however, it is an outlier. And I guess my question is, you went through a really nice breakdown for the high school when we looked at the on track to graduation and the chart that where you did the deep dive into what makes up that score. And so I'm just wondering, are we doing a similar deep dive into the middle school as a whole, and will there be an action plan to address that?
Yeah, we are. That on track to graduation was actually for the whole district, and one of the components was like 8th grade math. We are looking really hard at the middle grades, and we actually are going to Dr. Bergstrom and I talked to Mr. Avalos, the principal there, and asked him to work with his staff to put together a plan for how to address the data that we're looking at and make some action plans for the future. And the plan is for him to present that, along with us, but in the first meeting in January. So we're going to come back to you with a plan for that, about what our next steps are moving forward. And I don't know if you want to expand on that at all, or if that was good enough.
No, I think that's great, but I do think it's important to talk about the fact that when we see a middle level dip, that it doesn't rest on the shoulders of the middle level, because this is a system, and we're seeing the cumulative impact of a system on our students, right? So we have to have a systemic examination of what happens in the middle grades that probably starts in kindergarten and is having its impact in the middle grades. So it's never a singular school, it's always the system. However, we are doing an in-depth examination of when, to your point, Ms. Wright, when does the growth begin to slow? And what can we learn from that can better support our students and create a system that gives kids the outcomes that they deserve? Because I really want to point out what Mr. Tanner said, and that is the idea that our students are never deficient. Our systems are set up to get the results that they get. And if we want different results, then we have to adjust the system. And I think that's something that this is really, it tells us that, doesn't it? That our students start off very strongly, because if you look at this, the difference between one elementary school and another is a very minuscule amount. Our students start off very strongly, and they still continue to remain proficient in the middle grades, but their growth slows. And then it really takes off once they hit the higher grades. We are very curious as to why that is. We're not alone in that. That tends to be something that we see across the state, but we're not content with it. We know how capable our kids are, and we know that we have some data examination and some action plans that need to be put in place to address how to get better growth for our students through examining our whole system.
Go ahead, Anna.
Yeah, I just have a data question, I guess. The metrics for achievement and growth, is that all based on performance on the forward exam that's administered through the state?
Yeah, that for the state report cards, that they just use the forward exam. That's it.
And is that just given one time a year?
Yes.
And is that given one time a year at every grade level?
3rd through 8th and 10th in social studies. So it's an interesting, what I'll say though is they also use other assessments. So forward, yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Forward is given 3rd through 8th, English language arts, it's given, and then science in 4th grade and 8th grade, social studies in 10th grade, And then for ninth grade, they use the pre-ACT Secure, and in 11th grade, they use the ACT. So, sorry, when we, or 10th grade pre-ACT Secure for math and language arts, and then they use the Forward for social studies. So they've kind of cobbled together a suite of assessments. And sorry, I think that's probably a symptom of education-ese. We just say the Forward because, and we just mean it. We use that term to mean all the state assessment testing that happens in the spring, but they actually do use the Forward. DLM is a dynamic learning maps. It's an alternative for the Forward for a very few number of students who, for whatever reason, can't engage, usually because of a physical difference. They can't do the Forward. So there's DLM, Forward, and then those other ones that we talked about. But they're all administered once, like in a specific window, usually 2 weeks or a week. For ACT is like on the state testing day. So there's specific days only in the spring, once a year, and that's what they base it on.
Yeah, so I just want to kind of level a little bit of what we're talking about for the data. It's one exam once a year that we're basing a lot of the achievement and growth on. So that's just something for us to be cognizant of.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up too, because sometimes people are like, well, we don't want to, summarize a kid with just one test. And I totally believe that. Like, we would never make a high stakes decision about a student on just one of these things. That's why we use so many measurements. What we found though is, like, at the individual level, we use lots of different assessments and lots of different modalities, teacher observations and their work. I mean, the student work in the classroom is really the best indicator, and that's what we use on an individual basis. That would be really unwieldy at a system level to do that for like 4,000 kids. And so that's why we use, the large data systems, which, at an individual level, there might be a lot of variability. Once you get to a big enough cohort, you tend to see some pretty stable trends.
Sure.
But yeah, you wouldn't want to do that because it is just one measurement. But you wouldn't want to do that on a, individual basis or even a class basis. So thanks for pointing that out.
Yeah.
I think just a couple things from me. To Anna's point, this is one data set, but we've also been looking at other data. Well before the report card came out, we knew that there were troubling data at the middle school. So I want to make sure that the community knows that the staff, leadership, as well as the board is well aware of us examining that data, and that meets expectations, does not meet our expectations at Oregon Middle School, but we are on it and we are diving deeper into that data. We are putting strategies in place, and we have confidence that we can, figure out what's going on and turn that around, because we want to make sure that all of our students have the opportunity for proficiency and for growth. But this report card did not become an aha moment for us, that we've been on this and we've been studying this data for a long time. So I want the community to have confidence that we've seen it, we know it, we're seeing the trends, and we're doing something about it. Anything else that we want to add about school report card before we move on to the next agenda item?
Just that we're really, really proud of our students. And this is only one tiny fraction of all they can do and all that they are. So, and also really grateful to our staff. They work their tails off every day, all day, to do great things for kids. And this is one way that the great things are measured, and there are many other. And we have a lot of gratitude for them and their work.
Absolutely. Okay, moving on to teaching and learning update, 90-day goal cycle report.
All right, let's just keep cruising here. So as we've previously reported, we engaged with OSA's Sail Academy. And when we did that, we basically had 3 outcomes that we wanted from it, which are a little bit different than this goal, but I'm going to get to the goal. One is we wanted our leadership teams to have greater levels of interpersonal trust to make sure they're working really well together. The second one was that we wanted our school improvement goals to have a higher success rate than we did before we participated. And third, we wanted key systems and processes to be established and self-sustaining. And those don't just happen by accident. Those take a lot of cultivation. So we, the academic goal that you see on the screen is to increase both proficiency and growth. Remember those 2 different measurements. And it's important that we do this for each and every student and not just some groups. And that's a key takeaway you saw from that prior data. And so basically this summary has 3 important components. There are high leverage strategies that we've identified to try to accomplish this task of increasing that proficiency and growth for each and every student. And the big tasks are, 1, we want to have high expectations for all students. to at least grade level proficiency, but beyond. Like, we really want to go for that excellence and mastery, but grade level proficiency at a base level. To do that, we need to support students through inclusionary practices so that they have the access and the preparation to succeed at the challenging and rigorous tasks that we give them. And we're going to do that partially by examining student work frequently through protocols that are defined by the PLC Plus framework. So that's our goal and our plan for meeting it, kind of all in a nugget, but it's a very wordy slide, so I wanted to kind of unpack that for you. The next slide here is a quote that we love from Richard Elmore about schools know how to change, they know how to do it all the time, but they don't know how to sustain and do continuous progress. And so this slide is a really good reminder, one, that it's not, like, sale process isn't teaching us a bunch of new things. It's not like you go to a conference like, aha, brand new idea. It's meant to make us more effective at doing a few things well by really thoughtfully choosing the most high leverage actions, which you'll see, like PLCs are one of those things, setting specific and concrete 100-day goals, collecting data, analyzing it, but more than just that, we also want to be talking about data that isn't just standardized tests. Like, when we say data, we're talking about collecting student work and actually looking at it and doing that regularly and then adjusting our actions based on what that data tells us. So this slide is just really a reminder to stay focused on the long term and to regularly engage in the phases that we need to be able to do that. So let's go on to the next slide here. Okay, so the action steps that we had for our first 100-day cycle, so when we got together in June and they led us through this whole process, our steps were basically to develop an effective sale process communication plan. And what we did with this is we basically developed a common outline and presentation because the theme of all this, in fact, the book that we're reading as part of this process is called Coherence. So it's making sure that you're all doing the same thing, well, not exactly the same thing, but you're all going the same direction and you're aligning your goals, your priorities, and your strategies. So we developed a common message. We developed clear definitions of the terms. And then each school presented it to their leadership team during the summer. And there was a district office administrator who went and participated in that. I had a great time, went to Brooklyn, and we went through some of the sale activities with the school so that they could do the same thing, where you look at all the priorities that you do, and then you narrow it down to the ones that are really crucial for student learning, really aligned with our goals, which is great because then you know, oh, these are the things that we're going to focus on. So the leadership teams then shared it with the school staff so that everybody is on the same page and they understand it's not a new thing. It's, no, we're focusing narrowly on a few things that really are core. The second goal or action step was to include instructional specialists in our PLC model. One of the things that happened during the process was we did sort of an audit of like, okay, who's involved in your professional learning communities? Whose voice isn't at the table? And we realized we're not getting all the input that we need because we don't have our special ed teachers. I mean, sometimes, yes, but it was sort of like ad hoc. And we wanted to make sure that we're doing things coherently and really in a thoughtful manner. And so we said, we really want to make it the norm that we have special ed teachers, advanced learning teachers, school psychs, ESL teachers, OTPT, like we need those specialists in the PLC groups to inform the practices and provide data insights for the classroom teachers. So that was one of the action steps from the 100-day cycle. The third big action step was to improve the data analysis procedures within the PLCs. So really making sure that we're looking at student work and going through the protocols that it asks about, like, you know, what did we want them to learn? How do we know if we learn it? Who benefited? Who didn't? That sort of thing. What are our next steps? So those were the action steps from the first 100-day cycle. SAIL really emphasized this last time. Their big focus when we met in November, we had to do an analysis of how we did on our first 100 days. And they made this point quite a few times. They said, we're great at like planning things and doing them in education, but then we kind of like, at the end of the year, did that work? I don't know. It's time for a new year. Let's plan and do something different. And so they said, we really need to pause and study. And so we really wanted to go through and say that, look at those phases, to spend more time in studying the data of what you already did and summarizing what you learned and then planning the next step and making adjustments based on what you found. So we really focused on those. We did a plus delta activity, so what's good and what needs to be changed. So for the plus side, we found 3 main themes from everything that we did. One was a focused approach. So we really did successfully implement some of the focus areas for deeper engagement with student work and student data. We really did a good job with the coherent communication because we used the consistent like slide decks and messaging and terminology for staff alignment. We used key terms. We started developing intentional definitions of them and finding ways to kind of insert them to provide a common vocabulary, K-12. And then the PLC Plus framework adoption. We did retraining for ourselves at the admin team in August to make sure that we were all back on board. We did retraining for the school leadership teams to make sure that we were really using the protocols that have been shown by research to be really effective. On the other side, some of the things that we found were challenges or things we wanted to change. One was focus on curricular adoption because we were so focused on providing the teachers the support and the time that they needed to adopt a whole new curriculum. If you're K-5, it's ELA, and if you're 6-8, it's math. Now, that's not all teachers, but that's a really big chunk of them, and that's just a lot to do. And so that does not leave a lot of time or resources for other things. And so there might have been times when we're like, hey, we're not going to try to do this other thing that's related to our SAIL goals because you just need to focus on learning the new curriculum and doing the best you can with it. And so we're trying to also be very understanding of our staff and make sure that we're supporting them so that they stay and do the wonderful work they do. Another challenge we found was the PLC process effectiveness variability. There were just some inconsistencies. Another tool that we developed was a self-report of like how well do you think your PLC does in these areas. And so we had everybody rank themselves, crunch the numbers. We found some really interesting patterns, some common things that we could improve on. Also some variabilities to say, well, this PLC does really well in this area. This one does really well in a different area. What can we learn? So, but the delta part was it's not as consistent as we would like it to be to make sure that we're always looking at data the same way. And then the other challenge also with data is that we need more systematic data collection and analysis because just the more that we do with this, and as you remember from like the reports that we gave in October and November, there are challenges when you define things. So we could use that. So we then said, based on that finding, let's look at our next 100-day action steps. And so our first one is to continue developing a coherent instructional framework. And we had to develop these goal statements. So it's like, as an administrative team, we'll reflect on instructional practices, identify 3 high leverage strategies, and then we're going to make sure that we're going to collect evidence based on whether those are actually happening. So that's good. That's part of coherence. They introduced a thing called the 15-day challenge. It sounds like a TikTok thing or something. It's not. I suppose you could TikTok it, but that would be boring because it's talking about for 15 times or 15 days have our goal is for 100% of PLCs to collect relevant examples of student work or data, but student work, so that we maximize learning as evidenced by 90% of our staff surveys indicating that they looked at specific examples of student work and analyzed it during their PLCs. So the idea here is it's even a shorter evidence cycle than 100 days. It's like if you do this one thing for 15 days and you see positive results from it, that's a quick win and an encouragement to keep on doing it. And so that's what we developed. So it's really looking at that student work consistently. And then the last one is enhancing data collection and analysis. And this is a challenge. It takes a ton of time by principals. And we are investing in a pilot with a new data product that does analysis and visualization. And actually, we're training the administrative team and coaches on it tomorrow morning in about 13 hours. And so we're really excited for that, especially because it's a proven and yet still very flexible product team that's developing it so that we can have a lot of input. In fact, they want that. They're like, you send us all the reports that you need us to make, and we will build that into the system. And so we're really excited about that potential time saver and better analysis tool for that. So that's basically the 100-day cycle on that. And I think, is that the last one? Okay, that's the last one. So I guess what questions do you have about that?
Any questions from anyone?
Can I go back on the previous agenda item, or is that like against the rules?
I don't know, make it related to a 100-day cycle and you're good.
You talked about on here. You talked about ramble into it. In this 100-day presentation, you talked about curriculum changes, and it made me think about, in the previous agenda item, how you had talked about ELA at, what is it, K through 5, and then math at 6 through 8, and you had mentioned that the students in the upper levels of elementary are maybe struggling, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but because they haven't had that foundational skill. And my concern and question to you all is, as these kids who are 4th, 5th, 6th, whatever, are having the new curriculum, and now they're hitting the new curriculum in math, and we're looking at our middle school scores, that seems like a perfect storm. And I'm not an expert, so that's not advocating for one way or the other, but what is the thought process there for these kids who maybe in 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th are rolling into 2 different brand new curriculums?
I can tell you with the ELA curriculum, the skills block, there's a very diagnostic component to it, and everything works in cycles. So once the teachers, or once the students have had like diagnosed where maybe a lagging skill is, teachers have access to all the cycles through from K through 5. So we have the ability to fill in right where the students are and then compact to build up to get them up to grade level. Does that answer your question?
Any other questions? Go ahead, Troy.
So on this slide here, enhanced data collection and analysis, can you talk a little bit more about that? Like what is different about the what will happen in this 100-day cycle than what we did prior? And is there an example of how we're doing something differently?
Yeah, so the 100-day cycle, one of the plans for it is during that 100 days, we want to analyze the data needs that we need to produce for people who are interested, like the board, like parents, like teachers, like principals, what's actionable for us. And then once we have that, which we've started doing, look at our current data tools that are available and do sort of a gap analysis. Now, one of the things I'll mention with all this is that we didn't wait until, we knew this was an issue back in April. And so we started this process. That's actually the reason why we signed up for SAIL too, is because we knew that we had some areas of improvement and we wanted to enhance our efficacy for these things. So it wasn't that we, waited till the state report cards came out in November, oh my gosh, we'll do something. We knew this. And so one of the things that we have identified is that data component. The portion of this 100-day plan is to basically do the implementation of this new data platform. And so it's not necessarily, it should be using the data, but this isn't going to be teacher level use. This is right now administrators and coaches. And one of the things that we learned and have been told by other districts is you don't necessarily want to implement a brand new data thing in the middle of the year because that's overwhelming. And because it's still in development, we want to make sure that we've already developed the very easy to access tools and reports that people need before you roll it out to them. So at this phase in the 100-day cycle, it's going to be initial training for, some people have already gotten trained on it, but this is coaches, instructional coaches and administrators, so that we all have the same access to the tools. And then we'll be able to use the data analysis that we can get from some of our existing tools isn't customizable as well. So there are certain tasks that we can't do with our existing tools short of hand counting things, which is really, really, really time consuming. So what we're able to do with this is say, we want this. So for example, we want to be able to analyze, I'm not going to give you a good example, but some of the things that were on the spreadsheet that we didn't give to you in October, there are things that just would have taken 100 hours for a person to sit there and count, which our principals don't have that time. So we've sent that to this new group and we're like, hey, we want this. So the idea is that we'll be able to have some of those products easily accessible to principals to meet the needs instead of having to spend so much time cross-referencing between multiple assessments in order to do it. Demographics is a huge one, to try to find out what percentage of students who happen to be in a certain demographic are also in co-curriculars, for example, or have, X deficiency in some, credit amount or something like that. So that's two answers. One is it's the process of implementing it that's part of our 100-day goal, and during that process we'll be able to identify with more clarity what those outputs are from the data system and hopefully get them developed so that we can use them better.
So is it fair to say in the end, maybe next year, that the enhancement of the data collection and analysis may actually improve educator retention, the sustainability, some of the stuff we're going to be looking at, this educator sustainability task force, in that it'll be easier and less cumbersome for the classroom teacher to input or track that data? Is that fair?
Maybe. I'm going to be cautious about that, because if I was selling the product, I'd be like, yeah, absolutely, everybody's going to be happy. The kind of data that the classroom teachers are using is much more about looking at the student work. And so the data that the classroom teachers are going to be using, we would like it to be much more about looking at getting together with your PLC and looking at the student work and making decisions based on that. This kind of data could indirectly affect it, because what it's going to do is, right now, one of the reasons why we do the report, like the data reports once a year, is because it just takes so long to pull that stuff together, that the principals are like, yeah, I used to spend all June doing just that. Well, this should allow that to be minimized, which means, one, we can do it more than once a year if it's right there and we don't have to spend a month doing it. Okay, that's good, because then from a systems level, we can identify some things that are happening. So if a teacher doesn't notice it, on a student by student level, it might be something that we see from a broader level, and we can see like trends and themes that are happening to say, ooh, I see something happening here. I normally wouldn't have caught that until June when I found it for the past year. Now I might be able to see that in real time, which can allow us to be more flexible. The other thing it can do is it frees up more time for the principals so that they can actually support the teachers and be more of an instructional leader. Now that's a trickle-down effect, so I'm not going to say that it's going to make a huge difference to the lives of teachers every day, but I think there is something to that.
Thank you.
Other questions? All right. Thank you both.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to 5, student superintendent.
And there is some really fun stuff tonight. So congratulations to Madison Ostowski. She's the DKG Phi Scholarship recipient, and she recently received this at a reception at Edgewood, where she accepted the scholarship for the 22-23 and 23-24 school years. And this is a group of women educators who promote professional and personal growth, as well as excellence in education. So congratulations to Madison. Also, last month, the high school conducted the instructional rounds protocol. They do this at least a couple of times a year and have for several years now. And it's a best practice originating from Harvard University. And it's during rounds, a team observes classrooms throughout the building to gather data on the progress being made in priority work. And the team included OHS staff members, and I'm sure you can recognize many of them here. But a key part of the protocol is that we also invite in people from the community. So we have partners here from Edgewood College, from UW-Madison. We also have principals from Verona, Mount Horeb, and Sauk Prairie High Schools. So they all come together as a team, split up into small groups, observe classes, come back and bring the data of what they saw together to make broader, or to create broader themes regarding the day. It's really helped us to see the impact of the work at the high school over time, because those of us who were able to be a part of the first couple of instructional rounds and then see it again 8 years later, it was astounding. It really was. I could feel the difference in the classrooms, and it was so much fun. And not saying it wasn't great 8 years ago, it was. But some of the things I was able to see related to students engaging with rigorous coursework just knocked my socks off last spring. It's a great protocol. It's raining tacos. in case you didn't know, second graders in Miss Lemrise's class of Brooklyn earned the Golden Tray Award at lunch for consistently following and going above the expectations of the Brooklyn Bees. So they earned sitting in the special area and designing a playlist of music to be played while they dined. The favorite song was "It's Raining Tacos." I had no idea that was a song. Is it? Okay, I'll look that one up. The bilingual word walls. So teachers at Brooklyn and Prairie View are using bilingual word walls during language arts to expand students' vocabularies in both English and Spanish. So this is a really cool additional tool for literacy. Students using the bilingual word walls learn the definition and the Spanish translation of key vocabulary words. They also see the words in books, they use them in discussions, and incorporate new vocabulary into their writing. Schools around the world. I was actually able to do a few classroom visits with Miss Majeski and saw students learning to do some research here. So students in second grade at Forest Edge have been comparing and contrasting their schools to schools around the world. And they used their research to write a book called The Most Important Thing About School, that highlights the similarities and the differences between Forest Edge and the Doorstep School in India. Second graders in Miss Sunsby's class wrapped up this first module by sharing their books with Miss Jakey's kindergarten class. You see some very proud students in these photos. It's really sweet. In second grade at Brooklyn, we had some paleontologists. In this unit, they're learning about fossils through an activity that involves Play-Doh to record their noticing and inferences. This is a part of the new language arts curriculum, as was the previous post. So one of the really exciting things about the curriculum is that it's integrating a lot of science and social studies into their reading and writing experiences in a hands-on way, which is what's really important. And then another good example, the most magnificent things. Prairie View Elementary's first graders have been studying tools and the jobs they do as part of their new reading lessons. They've read books to learn about tools and tried out tools such as tongs, eyedroppers, measuring cups, spatulas, calculators, and magnifying glasses to see which tools are best for which jobs. Along the way, they also learned about habits of character, the tools within themselves, like perseverance, initiative, collaboration, and respect, that they need to complete the job. They finished the unit by reading The Most Magnificent Thing by Ashley Spires and designing and creating their own magnificent thing to solve a problem in their classrooms. They were excited to share their learning at conferences and during the staff open house in their classrooms. And then we had Reading Project visiting Brooklyn. Madison Reading Project guests visited Brooklyn Elementary to share their love of literature and how students are positively impacted by free books. Our third grade language arts curriculum focuses on how geography and where people live affects accessing books. So students learned about the power of literacy and how people throughout the world overcome learning challenges. Each student left with their very own free book. Several great examples in a row of students and their learning associated with the new Expeditionary Learning, or EL, curriculum. 3D pen practice. Students in Brooklyn and Miss Lynch's class explored the use of 3D pens working with filament and design elements. This experience brought up both perseverance and learning something new and creativity in color and design choices. Was it? Cool grant in action. And then this is called the Beacorn activity. Sixth grade students at Forest Edge were each given an acorn to take on an exploratory walk in the forest. Their goal was to find additional materials to create their own unique creatures. This great hands-on learning activity turned out great, and the pieces are currently displayed outside in our garden area for everybody to enjoy. These creations were inspired by photographer David Bird, who creates whimsical creatures from natural materials and puts them back into nature to interact with animals. And then we had our Badger Conference Honors Band. Congratulations to our Oregon High School student musicians who performed in the Badger Conference Honor Band at Verona High School last month. They were selected along with students from across all 12 Badger Conference schools to come together, study, and perform a wide range of music. Learning in Action was on display Monday and Tuesday as they had the opportunity to work with brilliant composer Dr. Erica Svano. The student ensemble also got to premiere her new composition, Like the Wind. This is a collaboration between Dr. Svano and Wisconsin Poet Laureate Dasha Kelly Hamilton to commemorate the Wisconsin Art Board 50th anniversary. That sounds like an incredible experience for our students. And then it's concert season. Showcasing of our music education is abundantly supplied throughout the district this month with a wide variety of concerts taking place from elementary through high school. And then just tonight, we have many of our students in the Skills USA district competition. I believe there are almost 400 students in Oregon High School right now from around area school districts in Dane County coming together for the Skills USA competition. So congratulations to all competitors from all the schools who are here this evening to show what they can do. And then finally, just a reminder to tune into the OST podcast. This week, it's on our English learner and multilingual learner programming.
All right, thank you so much. Okay, moving on to G, closing, future agenda. Our next meeting, because of our second meeting this month cancellation, will be January 8th. And so now we will move on to checkout. So I will go around the horn. Leslie, anything? Anna? Nothing. Troy? Heather? Mary?
Yes. So I did want to update the board. I mentioned earlier I had attended a few WASB meetings. I went to the regional meeting November 2nd. I'll hit a couple of high points. One of the topics there was because there are disagreements on tax breaks. There is currently a $7.1 billion excess of monies that have been taken out of taxpayer pockets but not dispersed to benefit the taxpayers. And this does not include the $1.8 billion in the rainy day fund that was generated. The other thing that WASB noted is that school boards in Wisconsin are seeing significant member turnover. Statewide, 40% of members have served less than 2 years. That was pretty impressive. And 48% have not completed their full 3-year term. So, yeah, sobering numbers. And then the last thing from that meeting that I wanted to share is regarding the upcoming annual meeting. They requested that if an amendment is planned, if the local boards have plans to ask questions or proposed rewording, they're asking that we contact WASB ahead of the delegate assembly just to streamline the conversation at the annual meeting. I also attended the legislative conference November 4th, and that was actually a really good meeting. There were several very good speakers, and I'll just touch on two. So Representative Joel Kitchens was there in person. He is the chair of the Wisconsin Assembly Committee on Education. He mentioned that he has routine meetings with superintendents, but that he has very few touch points with school board members. And so his recommendation to the WASB attendees was that school board invite assembly members to school board meetings, so to enhance their understanding of the needs of the school districts. And I thought that was very prescient, given that after he was done speaking, the floor was opened up to questions. And the question from the floor was, what's the rationale for funding only a third of the cost of special education for public schools, but 90% of that cost for private voucher students? And his response was that he doesn't think that special education costs should be fully funded for public schools because it will encourage students to identify as special education students. So I believe that that is an opportunity for us to educate our assembly. Let's see. The other point of note during that session was that English language learners are supposed to be exempted from the new Reading Act 20. And then something that we talked about just a short while ago, there was a great presentation by a UW-Madison researcher talking about, you know, the fact that globally the number of births are declining, and that there is anticipated to be decrease in the state of Wisconsin for years to come due to numerous things, but one of that is a decreasing birth rate, increasing death rate, but also during the years of 2010 to 2020, there were a significant number of people of childbearing age who left Wisconsin. So multifactorial, but they are predicting that enrollment will be decreasing for a while. And then just Charles Franklin from the Marquette Law School poll gave a very good presentation and looked at schools and public opinion, but yeah, so it was very informative.
Thank you, Mary. I appreciate you going to those sessions and also sharing some data as well as some astounding comments with us. All right, anyone else for checkout? Okay, we will take about a 5-minute break and then we will move into closed session.